welcome. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller and Dr. Jennifer Lewis, as well as other members of the Consortium of Gender Scholars. For noting on one of my scholarly papers, and particularly its gender aspects, and inviting me to present it for today's virtual talk. So gender equality is indeed a very important social issue that draws attention of many scholars. As you know, gender equality and empowerment of women is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals announced by the United Nations to be achieved by 2030. But unfortunately, there are different forms of discrimination and gender equalities, disparities that exist in virtually every country. No country has achieved gender equality despite much work going on. So today I would like to thank the founders of the Consortium of Gender Scholars for inviting me to share my small contribution to this active strand of research. So first of all, let me share the screen, my presentation with you. I hope you see the screen, right?
So looks great.
Go over the structure of my presentation. First of all, I'll talk a bit about the papers, and I'll focus on its gender aspects, and I'll talk more on the current situation on gender equality in Kazakhstan, on how Kazakhstan ranks on some key international indicators on gender equality, and provide some statistics and some analysis. And I'll conclude with highlighting some policy implications of today's discussion. So this year in June, me and my co-author, postdoctoral scholar Kanat Abdullah, we got our paper titled Good Governance Matters for Wellbeing, the Case of Kazakhstan, published online in one of the good journals in the field of public policy, in transforming government, people, process, and policy. To the best of our knowledge, our paper is the first study to investigate the determinants of subjective well-being in the context of Kazakhstan. Although there are several cross-country studies, none of them focuses particularly on Kazakhstan. Actually, the idea of writing on this topic came to me back in 2018 when I applied for the PhD program at Nazarbayev University. I suggested this topic as my research proposal. What we did in our study is is this one? Okay, we estimated the relationship between the determinants of subjective well-being, and we estimated the relationship between subjective well-being and its determinants. And our primary interest is on the effects of good governance on individual well-being. We measured good governance by perceived by individuals' perception of the quality of public service delivery. And as for the dependent variable, I think one slide is missing. I don't know why. So I'll just talk about it. So in our paper we suggest that individuals who are satisfied with public service delivery, they would report higher levels of subjective well-being. And we suggest that if government fails to effectively deliver public services and to effectively discharge its functions, then citizens would report lower levels of well-being. So as for the dependent variable, we suggest that well-being is a very broad concept, and standard socioeconomic data and indicators, they fail to take into account many factors that matter for individuals' lives, that matter for persons' lives, much of that matter for the society and for individuals. And we think that well-being is actually a subjective phenomenon to be experienced by individuals, and we measure subjective well-being with life satisfaction indicator measured on a Likert scale. What we did in our study, we used individual level labor household data from the quality of 5 surveys for Kazakhstan for 2018, and we estimated the relationship between life satisfaction and its determinant with the ordered budget model. And we included in our study a bunch of independent variables. The variables for the living environment, personal factors, social capital variables, and the variable public services that is derived from an individual's satisfaction with the public service delivery in major policy areas such as healthcare, education, electronic public services, tax, police, and emergency medical services. Also, there is a variable institutional trust that comes from citizens' trust in government institutions. Also, we included regional effects and individual such as age, gender, location of residence, and individual income. Here I would like just to briefly highlight that we provide sound evidence for the effects, for the positive effects of personal and economic factors, favorable living conditions, and effective public service delivery on individual well-being. So let me focus on the gender aspect of the study. Our study reveals the significant effect of the dummy gender variable. So the odds of reporting higher life satisfaction among females are higher compared to males. So it seems that women tend to report a higher level of individual well-being than men. So next, we proposed our explanations for this. In the first place, we say that a possible explanation of this may be that in a more or less traditional society like the one that we have in Kazakhstan, men who are heads of their families, who have responsibility to support their families, they may feel more pressure and they may be more stressed and therefore feel less satisfied with life than women. And for another interpretation, explanation, we refer to Frey and Stadzer, who wrote a book on happiness and economics. And we say that our finding may be related to women's propensity to have lower levels of expectations and therefore to be satisfied with less than men. And maybe for this reason, they may be happier and report higher levels of life satisfaction than men. So our reasoning is actually based on our analysis of the current situation with gender equality in our country. So let me provide you some statistics and some analysis on the current situation. Let's have a look at the Gender Development Index. This is one of the international indicators widely used to measure the status of gender equality across countries. It measures the disparities on the human development index by gender. So it provides the ratio of female to male human development index values on 3 dimensions: health, education, and economic dimension represented by gross national income per capita. So on this index, Kazakhstan fares quite well with the value of around 0.98. It's close to 1, which suggests that there is quite a high level of equality between women and men. So Let's have a look at another index, the Gender Inequality Index, also developed by the United Nations Development Program. It's a composite measure of gender inequality on 3 dimensions: reproductive health, empowerment, and the labor market. These 3 dimensions are represented by the following 5 indicators. You see maternal mortality ratio, adolescent birth rate, the percentage of parliamentary seats held by women, population with at least secondary education by gender, and labor force participation by gender. So the greater the gender inequality index, the higher the gender inequality. On this index, again, Kazakhstan fares quite well. It has succeeded in reducing the gender inequality index value from 0.40 in 2000 to 0.19 in 2019. And this value is much lower than the 0.25, which is the average value for Europe and Central Asian countries. So let's have a look at some details. Kazakhstan is strong in education with 99.3% of women aged 25 years and older having obtained at least some secondary education, and this is quite comparable. They're quite comparable in this respect to their male counterparts. Kazakhstan has also succeeded in reducing the maternal mortality ratio. For example, there were about 65 deaths for every 100,000 live births in 2000, and it's reduced to 10 by 2017. Concerning women's labor participation, we should state that it's quite steady, but there is a gap between men and women, which has been relatively persistent and doesn't show signs of narrowing. And you see that the labor force participation rate among women is lower than among men. I think this is, but there are no data on the reasons for entering and leaving the labor force. But we guess that there are several factors that could contribute to this difference. For example, you know that women are more involved in domestic work, and they can take more time out of the labor force, looking after their small children, looking after the elderly, giving birth, and they take extended parental leaves, more parental leave than men in Kazakhstan. And these reasons may account for this difference in some to some degree. So also, you know that there is a substantial literature that provides evidence for the gender wage gap. So Kazakhstan is not exception. On average, women in the labor market are paid less than men, and several factors, of course, can account for this difference. For example, women, they are more concentrated in lower paying areas such as administrative and support services and education and health, rather than higher paying industrial jobs. But here, at this point, it should be noted that recently our government has substantially increased the levels of pay in the education and healthcare sector. So we think that this can contribute to reducing the wage gap between men and women. We also know that in Kazakhstan, women are underrepresented in executive positions in most spheres of the economy. And as has been mentioned before, women are more involved in unpaid domestic work. And at this point, I would like to draw your attention to a recent study completed by a postdoctoral scholar, Professor Ricardo Perizza. They, in their recent paper that was presented at the GSTP conference this year, they provides evidence suggesting that there are disparities in labor market outcomes between men and women in Kazakhstan. And they find that in Kazakhstan, on average, women tend to work in lower skilled and lower paid occupations compared to men. And next, I would like to draw your attention to another index called the Gender Social Norms Index, because we think that in Kazakhstan, as in many countries, cultural norms, cultural factors can represent an important factor that can have an impact on the status of women in the society, in the family, and overall on the status of gender equality in the country. So this gender social norms index was introduced by the United Nations Development Program as well. It measures how social beliefs abstract gender equality, and it provides data for 75 countries covering over 80% of the world's population. So the index covers 4 dimensions: political, educational, economic, and physical integrity, and is based on responses to 7 questions from the World Values Survey. These responses, these 7 questions are used to create 7 indicators. So here you see the 4 dimensions and indicators, the 7 indicators, and the response options to the questions from the World Values Survey. So the answer choices, the response options, they vary by indicator. For example, on the first political indicator, that's based on the statement, men make better political leaders than women do. We have 5 choices, going from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And this is Gender Social Norms Index defines an individual with a bias as those who answer strongly agree and agree. You see that these indicators have different response actions, and this index defines the share of the respondents who are biased against gender equality. So, analyzing the data shows that the analysis of the data on this index shows that bias and prejudice against women are pervasive across the globe. And for example, 91% of men and 86% of women reveal at least one bias against gender equality. And in particular, about 50% of men and women across 75 countries say that they think men make better political leaders than women, while more than 40% feel that men make better business executives than women. And close to 50% of men think that men should have more right to a job than women. So the data for Kazakhstan are somewhat upsetting as well. So 96% of the population, 96% of the population have at least one bias against the gender equality. That 79% of the population have at least 2 biases against gender equality. And the share of people with no bias is minimal, about 3.8%. And if we look at the share of people biased by dimension, we see that the share of people biased against gender equality is greatest in the area of politics. It's 75%. And it should be noted that across all these 4 dimensions, men are more biased against gender equality. I mean, women's more rights and opportunities, women's empowerment than women. So men are skewed towards more bias against gender equality. So our statistics and analysis and research evidence suggests that there is much to be done with regards to promoting gender equality in our country. Although Kazakhstan has ratified some major key conventions that are aimed at eliminating all forms of discrimination against women, and we have put in place proper policy and legal frameworks, and also created the National Commission for Women's Affairs, an advisory body accountable to the president of the country. So we have this need for implementing policies directed at promoting gender equality, in particular policies that are directed at changing discriminatory beliefs and practices through educational and awareness raising campaigns. Also policies promoting employment and promotion equality in the workplace and women's status in the society, including the increasing of the representation of women in managerial positions. Overall, I would like to conclude saying that the policies thrust must focus on promoting equal rights and opportunities for women in all spheres of life. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Balzhan, for that very informative and in some cases, right, like I felt so good. It's like, yay, Kazakhstan. And then other parts like, oh, not yet, not there, right? Or worldwide. So let me just see. I think that, so now we're ready for questions, comments. A quiet room. Nettie, come on in.
That was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for that. I'm wondering, because the indexes you're using, you know, they're used globally, but some of the issues with them doesn't look at the nuanced underlayer. And I'm wondering, do you believe that in the area of policy research that we should expand these indexes to get a more nuanced picture of what's going on with the women? And what I mean that, you know, I look at Canada's index or you say, look how many politicians there are, there's female politicians, or you look at the Graduate School of Education in Nazarbayev or in Finland, our department has a lot of women, but they're almost like, they're in the position, but they don't have any real power because the system says you have to do it this way, and they don't try to make any changes. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yes. You know, in my presentation, I have shown that Kazakhstan fares well on two indices like the Gender Development Index and Gender Inequality Index. It fares quite well. But if you look at some details, for example, labor participation rate, if you compare wages, etc., you see that there are gender disparities. And also, I would like to note that this recent index, the Gender Social Norms Index, I think it provides, I think, a more, down to earth, a real maybe realistic picture, because actually it shows the range, the extent of bias that exists in the society against gender equality and women. Of course, this is based on subjective data, but nevertheless, I think such new data, new indices, they help inform policy decision making, and they can call attention to such important issues like gender equality. Yes, it's based on subjective data. There can be some degree of subjectivism, but nevertheless, we often hear that it's difficult to measure such concepts as the effects of cultural factors, cultural norms. But to some degree, this index helps to fill this void. But of course, it's not perfect. But at least we have some new measures being developed that provide some more information and new insights.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Balzhan. Thank you, Nettie, for that question. Other questions or thoughts?
I'm wondering, what is the situation with gender equality in Finland or in Philippines?
Yes.
Well, that's what I was asking, because on the surface, if you look at a lot of the policies, you go, oh, Finland is the land of, social justice and social equality, except equality and equity are two different things. And it was actually my student who informed me that. I said, oh, no, there's social equality with men and women. They have this if you apply for a job, they look at your documents and everything. And so there's an equal way in which they measure the two. Except the problem is what happens. And my student said, but my mother is in business, and when they hire, yes, they do hire men and women equally. However, what they tend to do is men get paid more because they change the title. And you get paid what your title is. So what they'll do is they'll hire the man and then change his title. And so they give him more money. So it's not overt, it's a very covert way of doing it. I said, are you kidding me? Really? And he's like, yeah, that's it's been happening for like decades. And then when I discuss this with colleagues, they say, yes, actually, it's a covert way of avoiding gender pay. So that's why I question, I think we have to look at the policies, but I think we also have to maybe look at it and I think Anna and I are on this kind of where we look at research from multiple perspectives. And so we have to look at the indexes and the policies that are being made, but then how are the policies being implemented? Not just what policies exist, kind of thing. So, but I don't know, Laura, you're from the Philippines. What do you think?
Yeah, I saw you start to unmute. Come on in.
Yeah, I do agree. I did not know that is happening in Finland. I have high regards for Finland being the best education. The best education system is in Finland. With regards to the gender policies, as in the Philippines, I suppose there are already many policies that have been crafted and approved, promoting gender and development, promoting gender equality for men and women. I suppose sometimes culture would intervene. It's not sometimes. Most of the time, our society tends to be a bit patriarchal. We put high regards on men, even in leadership. We would tend to think that men can lead better than women. But looking at the institution, in the context of our institution, there are already women who are in leadership, in status of leadership. But when it comes to gender pay and gender equality, there's discrepancy between equality and equity. Like, we have the same position, we're paid equally, but the kind of jobs we are actually into might be, a bit so hard on women and not so much on men, perhaps. But there's a discrepancy and a disparity on the kind of employment you have. If you're from the government, it's okay. But if you're in the labor institution, that's where there is a great disparity between pays for men and women. Women tend to be, paid less than men. Even in the promotion for employment and to get to a higher ladder, we tend to, for private institutions, they tend to give more due to those who are single, those who, then married, solo parent, and those who are who are still at the age of, between below 35. But if you're already, mid 40s, it's difficult for you to get the job. Yeah, there's so many gender issues that are being, that can be discussed and can be talked about and can be researched on. Just like Balzhan is looking at the gender gap index of Kazakhstan as developed by the United Nations. But that's a holistic view of a country. And we tend to, if we try to contextualize that, it may not happen, it may not be true to a portion of provinces, states, or location. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, and might as well go for Anna's qualitative research, just back it up with qualitative, no, aside from quantitative data. Because if it says it's here, but sometimes you can question, what the data is saying.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's such a, right, so Balzhan, you've given us this overview and a sense that has instigated, right, this thinking also, right? So in Finland and the Philippines, the idea of leadership, right? Who makes a good leader? Studies continually show that, from the US and across the world, that people see men still in a role of leader, and they see taller men also, right, as in the role of leader. And then also skin tone, right, comes into account as well, like who's a good leader. And so recognizing and actually bringing that forward, bringing that awareness to what are these inequities that are here, and how are they shown internationally, comparatively? What is it then we can go, into deeper aspects or into other areas, like Laura, you were saying, in terms of qualitative research, or Nettie, you were suggesting this as well. I know in the Graduate School of Education a few years ago, we worked with University of Cambridge, and we did a study on student well-being. And we were looking then, we had surveys to try to assess based on, one system that we had modified a survey, and then also interviews to try to understand this well-being. And well-being is so complex, right? Like the one of like the key things that came out fairly early on for us is that even the word well-being doesn't have a good translation in Russian or in Kazakh, right? That it needs to, people would ask, they'd say, well, are you talking about like physical well-being? Or they'd say, are you talking about mental well-being or psychological well-being? And so what was your experience in any of the in how people maybe were responding even around that concept of well-being, or perhaps that may have not been part of it at all, but I would be curious on your thoughts about the complex topic of, or concept of well-being.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, many scholars and economists recognize and acknowledge that, for example, GDP capita, which has been a default measure of well-being, it does not any longer, answer our needs in terms of measuring actual well-being of persons, because well-being has a lot of dimensions, has a lot of aspects. It, for example, in our study, it incorporates such factors as living conditions, for example, satisfactions with life conditions, quality of housing, cleanliness, some ecological factors, cleanliness of adjacent areas, satisfaction with air purity and drinking water quality. Also, there may be some personal factors that affect individuals' well-being, like satisfaction with one's health status, financial circumstances, economic conditions, family role, and responsibilities, professional skills, and there are also more less tangible aspects like social capital, social trust, social support that persons feel, and trust in government institutions. I think actually, the OECD has a good framework to assess subjective well-being for developed countries and as well as for developing countries. And that incorporates a number of elements like income, physical well-being, financial well-being, economic well-being, social well-being, work and life balance, etc. I mean, well-being is a very complex concept, and now we know that we have those measures that rank countries according to individual well-being, individual happiness. And I think policymakers should pay attention not only to such broad socioeconomic indicators as, for example, literacy rate or GDP per capita, etc. It must also focus on such a less tangible aspects of well-being, and we should understand that well-being is perceived, is felt, is experienced at the individual level, and a person. And there is a saying that. Money cannot buy happiness, and so we should even in some rich countries we have high rates of suicide. I mean, domestic violence, etc. So I think there are many aspects of the well-being that policymakers must focus attention to and inform their decisions.
Thank you so much, Balzhan. Yes, Anara,
yeah,
come on.
let me just add some comment. I think just a comment. I think well-being is. I agree with Balzhan and with your view. Well-being is like a word normal, and for everyone, the normal scale is different. So, for example, if someone, for someone having salary, let's say $100 per month is okay, for someone is not enough. So that's why it is all about satisfaction, and it depends on person. And of course, in terms of gender equality, for example, maybe in some countries where, maybe in some more Islamic countries, let's say Turkey, seeing more men in the company, in the organization is again okay, and they will not be opposite to this. If I think if society is okay and our well-being with this fact that well-being that men over than women in the organization, so that means that they are happy with this also.
Thank you so much for those comments. Go on, Balzhan.
Getting back to the issue of gender inequality, I think the situation of gender inequality is much better in Kazakhstan compared to some regions and countries. For example, recently I have read a news item on Afghanistan that says that some Afghan families, they sell their daughters in order to make living. This is terrible. I mean, it's like a crime against human beings. And they receive some money to support their families that last only for several months. And they, to make living, they sell their own children. And this is, I mean, such facts still, I mean, it's unbelievable that such things happen. I mean, in some parts of the world, it's just fine.
And related to that, I know, so Kazakhstan, in terms of raising awareness, this is one thing that I've been really impressed with the UN, UNDP. GenCon is working with various folks along in these different organizations, UNESCO, and we have coming up in just, I think, another week or two, the 16 days of the awareness of violence, gender-based violence against women. And so we will be sharing more about that on different GenCon sites. And there's actually a meeting happening today with the library where we're figuring the various steps that we can be involved in and share with people. So, so I maybe one last question or comment from someone. Laura, you've typed in, let's see.
Yeah, I just typed in. I recalled we actually had a research on the well-being of the secondary school learners and their academic performance. We were actually commissioned by a group of individuals to study the secondary school learners in our region being so low, having the low proficiency in the national achievement test. So they'd like to look into the well-being of the learners. And so, yeah, that's true. There are so many constructs and many dimensions. And so we anchored ours in PISA, where it has well-being connotes to wellness in cognitive, psychological, physical, social, and material. And yeah, it's really a complex, a complex concept. And it may vary by gender also, and by social status, and by the kind of school they come in. So we have found out that, yeah, age also, no? Age, where the school where they are from, the kind of peers they have, parental support, you know, the family structure. Yes, there are so many factors that would affect individuals' well-being. Yeah, especially much more in this pandemic.
Absolutely. The pandemic takes on a whole new role. Well,
yes.
Laura, you are perfectly right. Well-being is is highly age specific. I mean, in individuals at different ages, they need they need different. They have different needs in terms of well-being, right?
And different expectations, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yes. Yes, that's true. All generations have different expectations. The millennials, the Gen Z, and all the generation Alpha. How they look at life is different. Sometimes
exactly.
So stressed about this, no?
Yes, in the time of COVID and post-COVID, right? What that will mean for people as we continue on, right? In academic lives, outside in other lives, and those interactions and expectations and needs. So we're excited, Balzhan, to hear your next, the next study, the work that you continue to do. And thank you so much. If everyone, we can thank you, Balzhan, for being here. I will share my screen again. Okay, so just a few things then, and we will, actually I want to, so we just had, right, gender-related implications in the study of the importance of good governance for well-being. Excellent, really a brilliant presentation, Balzhan, thank you. Our next presentation will be November 17th. So Zazira Agabekova, let me go ahead and also stop recording. Let's see if I can find my stop recording button.